My parents wanted me to move in with them after being abandoned for 16 years, but now they have another child, born when I was 19, when my parents were still young. My mother was 16 and my father 17. Both families agreed that it would be best for me to be raised by my maternal grandparents, while my biological parents could go on with their lives. This is not to say that I don't know who my biological parents are. This is not a movie situation where the mother pretends that the daughter's child is actually hers. Everyone knows that my paternal grandfather is my father. He moved away when he was 18, but my mother stayed at my grandparents' house until she was 23, and I was about 7 at the time. But that doesn't mean we were close. She always treated me like a pesky little brother, not a son. She didn't like being with me, never came to any of my school events, wasn't interested in my schoolwork, and never took me to any fun activities. Whenever I talked about my day, she would roll her eyes or change the subject to shut me up. After she moved out, I hardly saw her anymore, except for family gatherings, where she spoke in an awkward high voice and wouldn't even look at me. Even though I already considered my grandparents more my parents than her by then, it still made me sad. My father still lived with them. Together at this point, but would come once or twice a year to visit his own family around the holidays, and always made it a point to visit me and take me to do some sort of fun activities like going to the cinema or my favorite restaurant, things like that. But to me, he was more like a strange man than a dad, because when I compared him to my friends' fathers who picked them up from school every day and went to their games and played with them on the weekends, I couldn't understand why this, who only saw him twice a year, would be my father. Fast forward a year ago, my father moved back to the city where we lived, and he tried to hang out with me more, but I wasn't interested, although sometimes I did say yes. I don't hate him, I just don't understand him. I even have a bedroom in his apartment, which is cool, because he lives in the city center, in full view of everyone. My parents started dating, and a few months later they announced that they were dating. This shocked me, and they asked me to move in with my father. I refused, but they thought we could finally become a family. I was about to argue with them when my grandmother said that it would be inconvenient to change schools and that I might lose all my friends. That was that, and although my parents didn't give up on the idea, my parents asked me to spend more time with them, which made me especially frustrated, because although I've never had any particularly tense relationship with my father, my relationship with my mother is definitely not good. I don't like being with her. She has never been nice to me in her life. I think she is just trying to save face now, as she knows my father wants me to move in with them now. They came to my grandparents' house last week and announced they were buying a house nearby so I could move in with them. I immediately refused, and when they said that changing schools was no longer an issue, I found myself in a dilemma. I said that it wasn't an issue, that I just didn't consider them my parents and didn't want to live with them. At that point, they dropped a bombshell on us. Not only did they want me to move in with them so that we could become a family, but my mother was pregnant, so we would become an even bigger family. Even though I was shocked, I still exploded at them. I told them that they were the world's worst parents. They abandoned me for 16 years, and now they are going to have another child and do the same thing to them. They never cared about me as trash and a mistake, made me feel like I shouldn't exist, left me to be taken care of by other people. And now they feel like they care about me and want to be my family. My mother yelled at me and said I was a brat and she won't make the same mistake and raise a second child. I told her she never raised me. From the beginning, my father said they were young and tried their best. The best you can do is pretty bad. I stormed out and went to a place where I could cry. I've been very depressed for the past week, and they called and texted me, but I ignored them. My grandparents agree with me that I shouldn't move, and my parents shouldn't expect me to be loving and forgiving after the way they treated me, but they think they're more mature and stable now and are starting a new chapter in their lives. And I guess I've been left behind. I have also thought about how old my mother was when she got pregnant with me and what a huge responsibility that must have been, but I still can't forgive them for what I heard when I reacted to the news. Editor, thanks to everyone for the NTA verdict. I feel much better and a little clearer in my head. Many thanks to everyone who commented on my grandparents. They are fantastic. I plan to show them this article so they know everyone can see what amazing people they are, and they deserve all my love and gratitude and more. I also need to come to terms with the fact that I have a lot of resentment and unresolved issues, as well as doubts about the future. I need to confess to my father first. He needs to know how I grew up, and I need to know why he abandoned me. I also feel that I need to warn him about my mother, because I'm afraid that my siblings will be abandoned and abused like I was. I'm preparing a list of key points and questions, and when I meet with him tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, I will ask him these questions, hoping to reach some kind of conclusion or resolution. Update: I've been having a lot of emotional ups and downs these days. A lot has happened, and my head is a bit messed up, but I feel like I should report back to everyone on the situation. I'll try to be as clear as possible, as some of you may not have read my previous posts. My main point is that my parents, who are 16, had me when they were very young, 16F17M. They split up and left me with my maternal grandparents. My mother was around, but she was indifferent to me. My father left and we had occasional contact, but it was always positive. Now he's back, they're together again, they have a new baby and want me to come back into their lives. I refused and told them they were horrible and shouldn't have had a baby, which got us thinking about an operation. First, I shared my post with my grandparents, who were very surprised by it. They were so happy to see so many comments about how amazing they and I are. I also took the opportunity to tell them how much I love them and how grateful I am for everything they have done for me. They are my real parents and that will never change. They shed tears and told me they love me and are proud of me. They never thought they had done anything special or were worthy of such gratitude. They had just done their duty as a family, but apart from that, they were the best. I started to try to sort my thoughts out and arranged to meet with my father to discuss what was troubling me. Why had he abandoned me? Why did he think he could just reappear in my life like that? I won't move in with them and I won't treat them as my parents because they never acted like them. We met again in the park and he tried to hug me, but I stepped back. He looked hurt and just apologized for what happened the other day and then started talking about how we could try to transition to a semi-cohabitation and respect my boundaries. I was so shocked that I didn't know what to say, so I took out my phone and showed him the post I had sent the other day. He started reading it silently. After a while, he finished reading all the replies and then asked me if it was true. I said yes. He asked me if I had any questions and I would answer honestly. I asked what happened when I was born. He told me that when my mother was pregnant, all the options were on the table: abortion, adoption, marriage, and my grandfather taking care of me. Only one of the parents adopted me. My mother was very afraid of adoption because some religious groups told them some scary stories about dead babies and mothers becoming killers or similar nonsense. So she wanted to give me up for adoption, but my father refused. He couldn't bear the idea of his child living somewhere else and never seeing him again, so he offered to look after me and give up his plans to stay in our city and go to university. But his parents weren't happy with this plan and urged him to go to university so that he could support me financially. They offered to look after me, but they were much older than my maternal grandparents. She was an only child, they were only 40 at the time, and my father had 5 siblings, and his parents were already in their 60s. Since caring for me meant also caring for my mother, my grandparents felt that they should temporarily care for me after I was born, because my mother was suffering from postpartum depression, and the doctors advised them not to take her completely away from her mother, as that might do even greater harm to our relationship. And my grandparents hoped that she would eventually love me as much as her son. One thing I didn't mention in the article about my father is that even while he was at university, he worked part-time to pay for child support, and once he was working at a law firm, he started sending more money to my grandparents and set up a college fund for me. This was news to me, and my grandparents didn't know, but my mother did, so I'm not sure what to do with this information. My father has always thought about me. He believes he left me a happy family when he left and worked hard to give me a better life, but I follow his life through social media. He went to parties, vacations, had girlfriends, did lots of fun things, and hardly contacted me. I asked him why he tried to be a part of my life, as I understood his need to study and work in another city, but his once-a-year phone call or text was simply not enough. He looked ashamed and apologized to me. I took the advice given in many comments here, that I could forgive but not forget, and that maybe we could build a relationship moving forward, but his past actions would always be our dividing line. If he has not fulfilled his responsibilities as a father for 16 years, then he can start now. He looked sad but accepted my terms. I then told him about my concerns about my mother, how badly he treated me as a child, and that I don't think she would be a good mother. I don't want her to look after my siblings, and I want to keep a low SL with her and not contact her. He said that they broke up after he went to college, and he would call occasionally to check up on things, but it soon ended. When he came back, she explained to him that she had a very good relationship with me, even though we saw each other every day, because I was going through puberty and she liked being with me, and that she was a very hands-on mother. I told him that everything she said was a lie and that she never cared about me. He had obviously read what I had written in my post, but I also told him other things, such as the fact that she had asked my grandparents for a babysitting fee to look after me, or that when we were still together she had told me to my face that I was annoying or disgusting. He was very serious when he said that he would talk to her, but that he really would not allow his child to be treated like that, and that he was sorry for everything I had been through. In the end, he told me that I could have a bedroom in his house, but that he fully understood that I would never live there. He was very emotional and asked me if I would consider him as my brother or sister even if I didn't consider him as my father. I replied that of course I would, and that I intended to be actively involved in their lives if that was possible. He started crying and asked if he could hug me, which I agreed to this time. I'm so happy that our conversation has come to this, and I truly believe that he will be a good parent to my siblings. Thanks again to everyone who commented and followed my story. I don't know. I'll update again. Update twice. My father texted me early in the morning to warn me that he was going to confront my mother. He didn't want anything to affect me and assured me that he had complete faith in me. I was prepared, because I expected her to call and scold me or do something else. I don't care what she thinks, but I've been depressed for the past few days, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to face another intense conflict. While the Reddit confessions were helpful, a few hours later my mother stormed into the house, yelling and screaming, cursing at me, saying I ruined her relationship, asking why I made fun of other people's private business. I said that my childhood was important to me, and that my father was going to be the father of her child, and that her actions had ruined her marriage. She cursed at me, saying that I was the biggest mistake of her life. I don't know how much more she could hurt me, but it was a despicable act, and I said I would do everything I could to take her child away from her because she was a monster of a mother. We were screaming, and the grandparents in the backyard must have heard us and came into the room to separate us and heard part of our argument. I was crying, and my grandmother took me upstairs to my room, and my grandfather yelled at my mother, "How dare you talk to me like that?" My grandmother comforted me a little and then went with my grandfather to confront my mother. I heard them outside the door, loudly reprimanding my mother, questioning why she had treated me like rubbish, why she had cheated my father, and telling her how disappointed they were at her attitude towards me, and how they had defended her so many times, thinking she was just a child trying to raise a child, but now she was an adult, but behaved like, and they said they were considering disinheriting her. My mother cried out loudly, saying how difficult it had been for her, how much she had suffered, but my grandparents simply wouldn't listen. They raised me, and she can live her life and make her own decisions without any repercussions. I even heard them say that if there was a custody battle in the future over the child, they would side with the father, unless she completely changed her behavior. They went out for a while to discuss it, and I don't know what they said, but eventually they came to my room. My grandparents looked very serious, and my mother was red-faced and crying, apologizing to me. I didn't respond, but my grandparents said on her behalf that she would immediately begin receiving treatment and that she was no longer welcome home. Afterwards, I called my father, and he was very angry. He spoke to my mother, then went to a work meeting or something. He questioned her about everything, which was obviously upsetting, but he was willing to work on improving the relationship for the sake of the child, provided that my mother also worked on improving her relationship with me so that I wouldn't feel uncomfortable whenever I visited them after he left. He made her promise not to contact me until they had spoken again, but my mother is here for you, and I asked him to consider what was best for him and the baby, and not to blame my mother if he didn't want to. One thing that has come up a lot in the comments of my previous posts is that my ancestors only want me to be a nanny and that I should stay away from them and the baby for my own sake. But I want to make it clear that I can't. I can't evaluate their intentions, I know nothing about them, but I'm really happy to have a sibling growing up. I have a very small family, just my grandparents and me, and I have a large extended family with uncles, aunts, cousins, but whenever I go back, I always feel like an outsider. They try to include me, invite me to Easter, Christmas barbecues, etc., but I don't really know them. As nice as they are, I always feel like I have a big sign over my head that says what that kid JN wrote in high school. I can't wait to have a sibling, love them, always be there for them, show them what family is. I want to be someone they can always rely on. I want to feel that connection with someone. So even though I have some resentment towards my parents and I have done a lot of things, I don't want to be the oldest. I hope this is the last update and there won't be any more family disputes. Thanks to everyone for helping me set up this website, letting me vent my frustrations, and having a community to support me and give me feedback. It's been really great. You've really helped me deal with it all. So thank you so much. Update 3. First of all, my grandparents are as cool as ever. I haven't moved and don't plan to. We spent Christmas together and everything was fine. My relationship with my father has grown closer. We get along better. He paid for therapy for me and we did a few sessions together. We are getting along better. He regrets that I lost my childhood, but understands that there is no going back. He no longer forces me to have a relationship with him, but instead gives me my space and allows me to have as much of a relationship with him as I want, which has relieved some of the pressure. To be honest, we have become closer because of my sister. We found out she is a girl. I helped him paint the nursery and we assembled the furniture together, which I really enjoyed. He and my egg donor are kind of awkward. They live together, but are not together. My father is furious with her for everything she said and did to me as a child and what I mentioned in my previous post. He is worried about what kind of person she will actually be around my little sister. They're in couples therapy and individual therapy, and although I occasionally go to my father's house, she is only just civil to me and I can tell she feels I have ruined her chance to play house with her second child. I try not to pay her any mind, but the only thing that worries me is whether she will end up poisoning my sister's view of me or subjecting her to the same abuse I suffered, as she too will be born into a situation full of tension. Thankfully, everyone else is concerned about my sister, which means I've also become more connected to my father's side of the family. They've always been kind to me, but I've always felt awkward around them, but now my relationship with my father seems to be thawing, and I feel like I'm increasingly belonging to the family and getting to spend more time playing with my cousins and aunts and uncles. I'm sorry there isn't much new to report, but that's the current situation. Update 4. It's been a while, but recent developments have brought me back here to give you an update. First, thank you to everyone who has left me a message. It lets me know that my situation is on your minds. Here's a recap of my situation, to save you from going through it. My parents had me when I was a teenager, and they let me be raised by my maternal grandparents, who have proven to be the perfect family for me. My mother is a kind, loving person, but she hates me and is full of hostility. My father is mostly absent, but he has played a positive role in my life. About 2 years ago, they came together and tried to get me, now 17, to move in with them, but I refused. They also announced that they were expecting a child, which made me angry and I lashed out at them, opening a Pandora's box of lies and manipulation. My egg donor had been lying and manipulating my father for years, creating an overall chaotic situation. She blamed me for the growing bond between my father and I, and although I still had some hang-ups, the egg donor kept her distance for the rest of the pregnancy while my father considered whether to continue the relationship. This brought us to the present day. They have a daughter named Ella, the most beautiful, charming, and adorable baby I have ever seen. When my daughter was born, my father was ecstatic and asked if I would like to stay in the hospital during the birth, which I gladly agreed to. It was wonderful to meet my sister for the first time. My father and I both cried holding her, while my egg donor was indifferent to her and wanted to give the baby to people around her so she didn't have to hold her. At this moment, my parents' relationship was in jeopardy, but my mother thought she would develop maternal love for the child, which never happened. When they returned home, they received dozens of visits from relatives and friends, and my father had to deal with everything because the egg donor refused to even come near the baby. The doctor is worried that she must be suffering from postpartum depression, but she refuses to accept help or counseling. These days, I try to be gentle with her to ease her mental state, but the situation has gotten even worse. A few days ago, my father went to the supermarket to do some shopping and saw the egg donor swearing at Ella on the security camera footage from the babysitter. When he returned home, my mother was beating the baby. My father was furious, and she responded by saying that his child was trying to keep us apart and that we should give them away. My father called the police and forcibly took my mother away for a psychiatric evaluation. When I learned of this, I rushed to his side. Fortunately, my sister was unharmed. While my egg donor was undergoing psychiatric evaluation, my father decided that she could no longer live with her and that she must take my sister away from my mother. I came up with a plan. Once my mother was released, she could go to my grandparents' house to rest and start therapy, while I would temporarily move in with my father to help him cope with the stress and avoid any more drama. It all started with my not wanting to live with my father, and now that I'm here, my grandparents will keep me updated on the egg donor's progress. Sometimes she feels so ashamed of what she's done that she wants to go back to my dad. Sometimes she's so drowsy and slow to respond. Sometimes she seems so happy and contented, talking about the past as if it never happened. There was supposed to be a court hearing about Ella's custody, but we've already obtained some kind of emergency ruling, and she's now in my dad's sole custody. Anyway, things have become a bit of a mess, and I wish things had not developed to this point. I wish I could still be there for my sister, and that whatever has happened to the egg donor can be resolved and she can get better. My grandparents are devastated by what has happened to their daughter, and it is hard for them to cope, but I am glad that they visit Ella almost every day. My father is also very upset. Although he now categorically rejects the idea of getting back together with the egg donor, he is still very sad. He is sad to see how my mother treats her child. He feels sorry for me, and he thought there would be an emotional connection and a life together for us. I was busy with my studies, and despite my efforts to understand the reasons for my mother's illness, I could not forgive her for what she had done to Ella. If this had been her first neglectful or violent act, I might have been more understanding, but I felt that she had been just as harmful to my sister as she had been to me, and I didn't want her anywhere near us. Update 5. First of all, I want to say that my father has been wonderful throughout this ordeal, and he has devoted himself to Ella in a way that I could only dream of as a child. He is patient and attentive, always focused on her needs, despite everything that has happened. For the first time, I started to really see him as my father. He was making up for lost time, and I truly believed that he regretted not being there for me. But let's talk about what happened recently. As you all know, my mother and I really hate to use the word her to refer to her, because after my father discovered that she had abused Ella, she underwent a psychiatric evaluation. And an emergency custody ruling gave full custody of my sister to my father. My grandparents have also been trying to understand what's going on and trying to help. I had planned to move in with my dad for a while, and to be honest, things were going pretty well, despite the ongoing chaos. But then my mom got released from the psychiatric hospital and things really spiraled out of control. After she was released, she initially played the part of the remorseful, broken victim, telling my grandparents that she was suffering from postpartum depression and had no control over her actions, that she would never hurt Ella again, and that she just needed a second chance. I wish I could believe her. I thought it was a breakthrough, but I was right. Within 24 hours of being discharged from the hospital, she completely changed her attitude. She suddenly thought it was all my fault, and she started yelling at my grandparents, saying that I made my father turn against her, that I poisoned their relationship because I always hated her, that I manipulated everyone to make her lose her child. and even accused me of trying to take Ella away from her so that I could play family with my father. Honestly, it was crazy. To their credit, my grandparents immediately saw through it. They told her that the only person responsible for her current situation was herself. They had witnessed how she had treated me growing up, and she had no right to accuse me of anything. They told her that she needed to take full responsibility for what she had done to Ella, and that if she wanted to continue to be involved in her child's life, she needed to undergo ongoing serious therapy. This should have been the end of it, but 2 nights ago, she tried to take Ella. Around 2 a.m., my dad and I heard a noise downstairs. At first we thought the house was shaking, but then I heard what sounded like the front door opening. My dad immediately jumped out of bed and ran downstairs, and that's when we saw her. My mom was standing in front of Ella's crib. Somehow she'd gotten a hold of the key. It turns out she had a spare key when she was with my dad. We hadn't had time to change the locks yet. It was a huge mistake on our part. She was rocking Ella in her arms and whispering something to her. I swear, at that moment, my blood had never been colder. My father immediately confronted her about what she was doing, and she just turned to him expressionlessly and said, "I'm taking my child." I don't even know if she was completely conscious at that moment, but I rushed to Ella, and my dad grabbed my mom and pulled her away from the crib. She started screaming. She screamed like a banshee, accusing us of stealing her daughter, of trying to turn the child against her, just like I did to my father. The neighbors must have heard, because the police arrived within minutes. My father had already called the police, and I was holding Ella as I tried to calm her down. When the police arrived, my mother was still screaming and clawing at them, demanding that they arrest my father for kidnapping her child. My father was very calm and just asked them to show her the custody order. Things got worse when they told her that she had no right to take Ella. She completely lost it, tried to attack my father, clawed and scratched at him, screaming that he had taken everything from her. They had to take her away by force. She is currently in a psychiatric hospital, involuntarily admitted, and my father is applying for a full restraining order against her. Needless to say, we changed the locks on the door the next morning. I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't think she'll ever get better, and to be honest, I don't ever want her anywhere near Ella again. I know that might sound heartless, but considering what she did to my sister and me, I really don't see her playing a positive role in our lives. Despite everything that has happened, my father is still in denial. I think there is a part of him that really believes she can get help and that she can be a good mother to Ella, but now he knows the truth. I don't know what's going to happen next. My father is meeting with his lawyer tomorrow to begin the process of terminating my mother's guardianship officially. To be honest, I hope this will be resolved quickly, because I'm exhausted, angry, and hurt, but most of all, I feel relieved to stop pretending and holding out hope that my mother will change, because I know she won't. My only concern now is for my sister, who is innocent in all of this. I refuse to let her go through what I've been through. No matter what happens, I will protect her.